This podcast may contain disturbing content for some listeners. It's intended for mature audiences. Listener discretion is advised. This is True Crime XS.
Did you see what is going on in Texas right now, in San Patricio County?
Yeah, it's on my list to check in the morning. No, I don't have any idea what's going on.
I texted you this article. I don't know where this is headed, but so this is down in a weird spot in Texas, and it says, body discovered near Mathis through GPS coordinates given to family in New York. Deputies got a GPS coordinates from a New York caller, which led them to a body of an 18-year-old man on County Line Road 798 near Mathis, Texas. A phone call from the northeastern part of the United States led San Patricio County deputies to a body near Mathis. Sheriff Oscar Rivera said they spoke with a caller from New York who was waiting on his nephew to come up from Mexico. Officials said that the man received a call saying his nephew had medical difficulties and died. Deputies got GPS coordinates from the New York caller, which led them to a body of an 18-year-old on County Road 798 near Mathis. Rivera said officials received a similar call a few weeks ago about a woman who was supposed to be headed to Alabama, was later found dead after the family received the GPS coordinates. It's unclear who's been calling the families to give them GPS numbers. So, you know what coyotes are, right?
I do. I was going to say it's literally the coyote that brought them here.
It's like the nicest coyote on the planet, or it's a serial killer, one or the other. I don't know. I don't think, if it's only
not a serial killer.
Well,
who hangs out at the border?
No, but the coyote could be picking one person from every party they bring over and killing them.
Oh, I think that they have a hard enough time as it is. I don't think coyotes, that would be really bad for their business. So at some point in time, and I remember, I think, what the case was, but it doesn't matter because the number of unidentified bodies that come across the border is staggering. Yeah.
We've gone through it. Yeah.
It's really terrible. And so I don't know. I hate to say like anything about it because I feel like it's a really hard journey because they come in illegally. And so a lot of times they end up dehydrated and they die from things like that. So it's not murder. It's, they succumb to the elements essentially because they don't have the essentials that they need. And it's really sad, but it's that would actually be the perfect setup there. But I don't see how you get any joy from that as far as if you're a serial killer.
It's incredibly dangerous for all the parties involved, including the coyotes who are, I've only met a couple. I worked for someone at one point in time there was a lot of surveillance going on, and they were they were trying to bust. It was like a labor ring where they were bringing people in and making them work kind of like indentured servants. And when that whole thing was going on, I had some experience with it. This is 2004 or so. It was terrible then. I'm sure it's worse now. And when we were doing Israel Keys and when we did Ted Bundy and when we did some different stuff, like the time of Israel Keys down in Texas, I had the opportunity to sort of go through NamUs and look at missing people and unidentified people. And, there's a lot along the border. They're crimes that are sort of just like a Rubik's Cube because there's so many elements that you don't know.
I feel like a lot of them are just get left behind and they die.
I'm not saying there's anything nefarious about what happens to them. I'm saying because it's so dangerous and because of how sort of covert it all is, they just don't get solved from the perspective of this was an accident, this was a medical emergency, this guy died of natural causes, too much stress or whatever.
And it's dumped on these tiny little towns that don't have the resources to deal with them. That's one of the biggest things that I've seen.
Yeah.
Because where they end up is, it just so happens that they're not big places, and that's why a lot of these bodies go unidentified. And it really is kind of the whoever's sending the GPS coordinates to send them.
Yeah. So today, we're wrapping up the summer stuff, and we've actually already recorded like multiple episodes for the fall, and I paused everything because of some events that were going on in true crime. And I like to do that every once in a while. I used to incorporate it a little differently and play some clips where we just kind of talk about a headline. Because, people don't like a lot of banter, so we banter about true crime is sort of the thing that we do. With this one, this whole series of stuff that we're going to talk about, I found something really interesting right before you and I started talking.
I love it when you do that, because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, so this is tied into what we're about to go into. But I want to tell you about this case, and I figured I'd just record us talking about it because I want to hear what you think of it. These are court documents. This is actually out of the state of New Mexico, and it's literally out of the Supreme Court of New Mexico. So it's a final ruling. This case is from being decided on January 23rd, 2001. They're talking about someone named Darcy Smith. And in March of 1998, Darcy Smith was convicted of first-degree felony murder. Felony murder has always been a long-standing thing with me. The felony murder doctrine is a very archaic thing, but the idea is felony murder means you can be at the scene of a crime, have dropped someone off at a crime, be on the premises of a crime, and you can end up being charged with felony murder even if you don't pull the trigger, and even if no one you're with pulls the trigger. For a number of years, one of my first big projects was going to be a felony murder documentary. I pushed and pushed and pushed, but I could never get people to understand how terrible felony murder can be. So Darcy Smith is convicted of first-degree felony murder and false imprisonment.
I just want to clarify, felony murder, it's when someone dies while other people are committing felonies. The people committing the felonies can be charged with felony murder.
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to, because I thought something different for a second, but go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know that I said it exactly that way, but I
you
appreciate
just said
the clarification.
You said you could drop somebody off, or you could be at a crime scene, or not. Somebody could have a heart attack and die when you rob them, and you could be charged with felony murder because you were robbing them.
Yeah, but you could be the getaway driver for somebody at a crime scene where a robber robs someone.
You absolutely could, but my point is you have to be committing a felony at the time that somebody dies.
Got it. Yeah, that's a very good point, and I appreciate that clarification. So Darcy Smith, she gets sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder and to 18 months for the false imprisonment sentences, and the sentences are going to be served consecutively. I don't know if a lot of people know what the word consecutive means legally speaking, but there are two types of sentences. You can have a concurrent sentence, and a concurrent sentence means that if you get 5 years for one crime and 2 years for an adjacent crime, but they're concurrent, that when you're imprisoned and all the credit that you received and everything related to the sentence, it's happening at the same time. So you're not doing 7 years if you get 5 and 2. You're doing 5 years, but 2 of those years are there for 2 different crimes. They're just happening at the same time. Consecutively, meaning if you got 5 and 2, you would serve the whole 7 years. So your sentence is 7 years minus whatever good time and credit, etc. But those sentences both have to run. So the defendant in this case is, like I said, Darcy Smith. They're raising a challenge to their conviction that there was insufficient evidence to convict them of felony murder and that there were errors made by the trial court related to evidence, restrictions placed on the defense, and refusing some proposed jury instructions. And also, they were basically saying that the prosecutor had improperly commented on the defendant's right to silence and character, which all of these things are interesting. The Supreme Court of New Mexico ends up affirming the defendant's convictions, but I want to read to you what happened here because it's interesting. So the next part of the appeal is what's called the factual and procedural background. On the morning of November 24th of 1992, in a remote area near Bernardo, New Mexico in Socorro County, the body of a 17-year-old murder victim was discovered. The state police established the identity this male 17-year-old from a gift certificate found on the body, which had been given to him by his parents for his birthday on November 23rd, the day before. The crime remained unsolved until late 1993, when the New Mexico State Police arranged for a Crime Stoppers television program about the murder. Several weeks after the broadcast, Darcy Smith's friend, Jennifer Jones, contacted the State Police Investigation Task Force and a man named Michael Davies. Mrs. Jones provided information that implicated the defendant, Darcy Smith, a man named Eric Smith, and a gentleman named Mark Apodaca in the murder of the victim. At the time of the murder, Smith and Apodaca had been good friends for some time, and Apodaca was married to the defendant's sister. So the defendant and Smith, they had been married in June of 1993. So this is Eric Smith. And shortly after their marriage, they began sharing housing with the Jones couple, which continued until the defendant and Smith were arrested in December of 1993. So basically Jennifer Jones is living with Darcy Smith and her husband. So first, Apodaca was arrested and gave a voluntary statement about the killing. The defendant and Eric Smith were subsequently arrested and charged in this victim's death. In a separate trial, Eric Smith, was convicted of felony murder, false imprisonment, aggravated assault, conspiracy, tampering with evidence, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. Apodaca had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and related crimes in a plea agreement. As part of that agreement, Apodaca agreed to testify truthfully about the defendant's participation in the victim's death. So this girl, Darcy, that we're talking about here, she was 17 years old at the time of the murder, and she was initially charged in what's known as children's court. In January of 1994, the state filed a motion to transfer the defendant from children's court to the district court so that Darcy could be tried as an adult. And after an evidentiary hearing on the motion, the children's court transferred the defendant to district court, and they decided, yes, she is an adult. She will be tried as an adult. Subsequently, the defendant's lawyers filed an appeal with the Court of Appeals contesting this arrangement. And they raised claims of due process and speedy trial violations, but the Court of Appeals sort of steamrolled it and affirmed the trial court's actions. At trial, Apodaca testified about the events of the night of the murder. Mrs. Jones and her estranged husband, Brian Jones, testified about the defendant's later admissions regarding that evening's events. So Mark Apodaca stated that he, Eric Smith, and Darcy Smith had spent the evening drinking and decided to go out and shoot at rabbits. Each one of them was armed with a weapon. Eric Smith, had a .44 caliber revolver. Darcy Smith had a 9mm handgun in a holster on her right hip. And Apodaca had a 12-gauge shotgun. Apodaca testified that they had gone shooting before and that the defendant was proficient in the use of various weapons, including the type of handgun she had with her that night. These are kids. This is a 17-year-old girl. I just want to point that out really quick. So at some point, the three of them made the decision to pick up someone at random to scare the hell out of that person. That's their words, not mine. In an area near the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque, they spotted the victim. Eric Smith forced him into the backseat of his two-door car at gunpoint, and they all drove off. Apodaca said that as they were driving, Eric became angry with the victim. He asked Apodaca to steady the steering wheel so that Eric could turn around to the driver's seat to hit the victim in the face with the butt of his .44 caliber revolver. While Apodaca steered the car during the beating, the defendant put her foot on the gas pedal to maintain the car's speed. So these three people are in the front seat of this car, barely driving, but all of them are doing something except the driver, who is beating the person in the back seat, which is, so I just want to point, this is horrible, but it's also insane.
I feel really bad, like giggling, but like I'm imagining this happening, and not the beating part, but like the girl with her foot on the gas and the guy reaching over to hold the steering wheel. So they're all involved in this. And Eric pulls off of Interstate 25 at the Bernardo exit. They drive a short distance off of the exit, and he stops the car. Eric drags the victim out of the car
and has them stand in the back of the vehicle where Darcy and Apodaca join them. After further angry words to this random stranger they have grabbed off the street, Eric begins to beat the victim, and then he shoots him twice with a .44 caliber revolver. After the victim falls to the ground, Darcy, the defendant, shoots him twice with her 9mm handgun. Apodaca testified that after she shot the victim, the defendant picked up one of the spent casings from her gun and said she was going to keep it as a souvenir. Smith next retrieved the shotgun from the car. This is Eric Smith. And he and Apodaca each shoot the victim 3 more times. So afterwards, Darcy, Eric, and Apodaca get back in the car and they leave the victim there. They described Darcy as being excited about the shooting and hyped up during the ride back to New Mexico. At trial, Ross Zumwalt, the chief medical investigator for the Office of Medical Investigations in New Mexico, testified as an expert in forensic pathology about the autopsy of the victim. The autopsy revealed the victim had been shot 10 times and had bled to death from his wounds. Although given the extent and severity of his injuries, it was unlikely that he would have survived anyways. The victim had numerous injuries to his face. This is a 17-year-old kid. I just want to say that one more time.
And it's really important to understand that if you bleed to death, that means he was alive during all the injuries that he sustained.
Right. That's where I'm headed with this. He's a 17-year-old kid. So kids, like people in their teens, this victim is in his teens. They're very resilient from injuries to a point. Most teenagers are. He had numerous injuries to his face, including bruises and lacerations caused by a blunt object that the doc said were injuries that were consistent with being struck by the butt of a revolver. Additional bruising was found on the victim's forearms, the backs of his hands, also caused by a blunt object. These bruises were described as defensive injuries, which can occur when a person raises his or her arms or hands as protection from blows. So they go through this whole thing. They find, basically the court at the end of this, because I'm not going to go through and read every single line of this. I'm just going to say at the end of this, the court decided that this person definitely committed felony murder and false imprisonment. They didn't err in anything that happened, and the convictions for Darcy Smith for felony murder and false imprisonment were affirmed. Okay, I'm saying this because, first of all, it sets up like where I'm headed. That is crazy. What do you think of this case?
Well, I was trying to figure out who the victim was, but I don't know that it says.
It doesn't.
Because he was a minor.
He's a minor, so it's sealed.
It's insane. Like, this is... It is so... It almost, shifts my entire perspective on crime. Now, you said that this was in, 90-something?
This was in the 90s, correct.
Okay.
You want an exact year? I have it on here. I can give you the
1992
year.
was when he was found. November 24th, 1992 is when he was found. Right. Because this would be a legitimate stranger murder.
Yes.
And it's like I feel like they probably wouldn't have done it if there wasn't a group of them.
Well, now I want to tell you a story. All that took place way back in the past. Even that appeal was heard more than 20 years ago. It was heard in 2001. So one night in July of 2021, the University of New Mexico police picked up a man who they said started to make statements about murders from a long time ago. One of the murders that he referenced, that police say he has now confessed to, is the brutal stabbing death of a University of New Mexico student who was walking home from a party in 1988. So 4 years prior to this incident. Althea Oakley was a 21-year-old from Araya Hondo. She collapsed on a nearby doorstep and she died at a hospital hours later. After 33 years, her case had long gone cold. But on Monday, about a week ago, Albuquerque Police Chief Harold Medina, who had met Oakley as a teenager and was the first recipient of a scholarship set up in her name in 1990, notified her parents that detectives had a suspect in custody. This suspect was charged with a probation violation on the 19th. That would have been Oakley's 55th birthday. So the suspect was being represented by the offices of the public defender, and he was sort of shut down from talking, but he had already talked quite a bit. So as the case proceeds, they were looking to make sure that this suspect didn't have any conflicts of interest with the law offices of the public defender because of how many times his family had been represented by the office of the public defender in the past. According to a criminal complaint filed in Metropolitan Court, the suspect told detectives that he was working at the Technical Vocational Institute, which is now Central New Mexico Community College, as a security guard when he saw Oakley walking home on the night of June 22nd of 1988. He said he wanted to go talk to her, but then she was gone, so he decided to pursue her in his vehicle. Then, he said, he decided that he was going to hold her at knife point and rape her. When she passed by, he said that she smiled at him and said hi. So the suspect said he stabbed her in the shoulder blade and left side. When I thought about it, what made me do it, what made me attack her, was all the hatred I had for women. Because growing up, I saw how men treating women bad, and they go for the bad guys. So I try to be nice and be good, and they just didn't want that. Detectives started looking through the case file and realized that the suspect had provided details that were not in the media coverage at the time. They began to talk to neighbors who had lived in the area and the suspect's former employer who corroborated when he would have been at work. According to a complaint now filed, this man's name is Paul Apodaca. So Paul Apodaca, he said that he left his watch, one with a sun and a moon on it, that his aunt had given him at the scene, and a watch that matched this description was found near the blood trail. Apodaca was living in the University of New Mexico area with his brother at the time. His brother's name is Mark Apodaca. Several years after Oakley's death in 1995, the brothers made headlines after Mark Apodaca was convicted of murder, and Paul Apodaca was convicted of raping a family member. Paul Apodaca told the judge he had raped the family member so that he could be sent to prison with his younger brother. He was sentenced to 20 years and then promptly sent to a different facility. Oh my God, what is wrong with these people? Medina, the police chief, he tells the Albuquerque Journal, the ABQ Journal, you can find all this story in the ABQ Journal. He tells them on last Wednesday that the man who confessed to killing Oakley had also confessed to other homicides and sexual assaults in the area, and that he seemed like he was a poster child for a lifetime of interactions with the criminal justice system. Most recently, it appears that Apodaca was homeless, but according to court records, he had pleaded guilty to aggravated assault with a deadly weapon in March, and he had been sentenced to 3 years of probation for supervised probation. According to a probation violation report, he told his probation officer on July 16th that he was going to the West Side homeless shelter because he didn't have anywhere else to go. He was told that he had to stay there until he was accepted into an inpatient program or a halfway house. And then on July the 19th, the officer received an alert that Apodaca had failed to show up at the shelter. This is Paul Apodaca, not Mark. His electronic monitoring showed that he was staying behind a Walgreens on Rio Grande and Central in this area. He was arrested by the University of New Mexico Police Department on the probation violation on July the 20th. When a detective interviewed Apodaca in jail, she asked if anything in particular prompted him to confess all the things he'd been confessing to the patrol officers. He said no, it was a shame it took him so long to get to this point. Paul also said he realized that what he had done was evil and dark, and he said the word of God had helped him overcome this struggle. This is not even the most interesting part of this, but what do you think of this guy and his brother so far?
Not much.
Have you like you ask a lot of questions about like what were they thinking, what were they doing? I hear you say like I want to know what that guy like what made him confess and stuff like that with other cases. What do you think about Paul here?
Honestly, I feel like he would have been 21 in he'd be young, right? When he was committing crimes.
Well, I mean, he's working as a security guard. It says in this article, according to what they're saying right now, it's been 33 years, and he is 53 now. So he would have been 20, turning 21.
Okay, so so he was a young adult, and so I didn't know about his brother until we just talked about it. So I could have some questions, but honestly, that kind of just raw, terrible behavior, it's almost like oh, they never had a chance. Like, I don't know what causes that in people, but it's especially what you were reading. I guess my brain sort of went into shock from the kids taking that kid and just, I mean, I don't understand what would prompt anybody to do something like that. Like, I guess it's a good thing everybody's got their smartphone now, so we don't have kids bored enough to go take people and shoot them.
Well, this is not even the most shocking part of all of this. So I'm a reader. Like, I love reading. Did you grow up reading?
Yeah, I read a lot now. But what do you think about this?
I'm going to get there. This is okay. I'm headed somewhere with this reading thing too. But listen, these guys, he is trying to explain something here, and I did have a revelation reading like what he's talking about. I can't wait to see like where the rest of this goes, because I want to see how many cases they wrap up under this guy. He is trying to explain that something about how men treated women set him off, and that's how he decided to be the asshole. That's what he's trying to say.
Do you think that's a cop-out, though?
Well,
because how does that make any sense?
I feel like I would be blowing him off if I said it was a cop-out, but this is the revelation I had.
Okay.
I think this guy is not super smart, although he has been sitting here for 33 years and not been caught by the authorities, and clearly something is going on. I don't think he's super smart. I don't think he has the ability to really describe what he's thinking there. I think he's a rage killer. Like, you know how you were talking about like serial killers, spree killers, mass killers, like some of them just have this rage inside of them and they snap and they do a thing. I think like he would just get mad. He wasn't like girls didn't find him pretty or something. I say that.
I want to be clear that I actually don't think serial killers are like rage killers. I think that anybody could kill somebody in a fit of rage.
Right. Well, okay. So I don't think this guy is a planner, is where I'm headed with that.
Right. And so it's a different kind of thing. He just gets mad and kills somebody.
Yeah, like he gets mad and gets all rapey and killy. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm saying like I don't think he's smart enough to articulate it any other way. So the thought that you have when you say like these people are organized or disorganized serial killers, but I'm differentiating this other person who has killed multiple people because I feel like he just has loser anger issues is kind of how you describe it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would agree with that. And I feel like it, because his brother, he said that was his younger brother, because he's with his friends doing like really terrible things. I would say, yeah, they're just like bored, loser, angry people.
Yeah, it was like super hard for me to read all of the. First of all, that 17-year-old kid that they killed, that was found in 1992. So the thing about like his that sort of makes me go, oh my God, is I kind of remember where I was at certain times doing certain things. The day they found that kid's body was I think it said November
24th.
Okay, that was a Wednesday.
So it was right before Thanksgiving?
It was the day before Thanksgiving.
Right, okay.
So, like, this kid had just had his birthday, and, like, the next day, you know what he was going to be doing? Hanging out with his family. But the part that really bothered me about it was that they literally just picked up a random person to scare the hell out of him.
It could have been anybody.
It could have been any person, period.
If he had just been, like, 2 minutes one way or the other, it wouldn't have been him.
Yeah, and I chose to read from the perspective of her case because the other cases, they're those people are pretty useless.
I was going to say, like, that is a perfect example of why felony murder should exist.
I know. It's like, I thought about that even before I like started reading it. I rail against felony murder in a lot of situations. It has to be, it's a legal mechanism that has to be very carefully applied. This is definitely the case for it.
It's meant to be a deterrent. It's meant to deter people from committing felonies at all.
Right.
Because the underlying thing would be if somebody happens to die, you could be charged with felony murder, and you don't want that. But this sort of, so I would have been a kid. I don't remember this. I don't remember anything about, I don't think I've ever heard of any of this case, but it actually goes against everything that I've learned about true crime now. But it explains why I might have some preconceived notions of things, because this sounds like everybody's worst nightmare. And this kind of thing doesn't really happen that much anymore.
No, it doesn't.
I don't even think it happened very much then.
Well, it really doesn't. I mean, so it's interesting how, to me, how rare these people also are, if that makes sense. Like
it's really, really rare. And the fact that 3 of them got together, like, that's crazy.
Well, so this guy has a very long road ahead of him, legally speaking. Like,
I think he'll just plead out and end up in prison, don't you?
Forever. Well, I would say yes to that. I would say absolutely yes to that.
I think that's what he's actually trying to accomplish, given he was living behind the Walgreens.
Yeah, I mean, maybe that.
I don't think that
goal.
he's repentant. Which is none of my business. I shouldn't judge him, but I feel like he's at a point now where he just needs a place to sleep and 3 meals a day.
Well, I'm totally curious to see how all of this goes, largely because I want to hear what all he's done, and that will be when I start to form my opinion of him, when I can get like a grip around what he's done. But I want to talk about like, I don't know how to do this part, so I'm gonna.
Now he's been in custody. He's just in custody for. He's just been charged with rape and murder of Althea Oakley, and that happened in 1988. She was fatally stabbed, but he has confessed to 3 rapes and 3 murders. And
I want to separate this one from the story and how important it is for just a second.
Oh, okay. Well, I was trying to bring it together.
Yeah. So
sorry.
One of the things that's happening here is on July 16th of 1989, there was a University of New Mexico soon-to-be student who had graduated on June the 14th of 1989, and her nickname was Kate. Her name was Caitlin Arquette. She was moving into an apartment just shortly after her graduation with her boyfriend, Dung Nguyen. They had paid for this apartment with the help of money that they had received from insurance settlement related to an accident. Now, Nguyen was 8 years older than her, but Caitlin had lied to her parents and said that he was only 4 years older. Her parents liked him, so they move in, but they started having some trouble once they had moved in together after graduation. And on July 16th, she had been talking to her mom saying that she planned on breaking up with them. She started to ask her mom to tell little white lies about where she was and where she'd been. She went to visit a friend on 9:30 p.m. of July 16th and then headed east down Lomas Road in Albuquerque, New Mexico, towards her mom's house. So she reached an intersection and another car pulled up next to her, and one of the occupants said something to her, then shot her twice in the head. Her car drifted and crashed into a light pole. So shortly before midnight, her mom learned that Caitlin was in the emergency room, and she initially thought that it had been a car accident because that's what was being reported. But once her mom and dad got to the hospital, they learned that she had been shot. 5 hours later, the police arrived at Caitlin's apartment, and Nguyen was home. Dong Nguyen was home. He was home alone, and he was completely unaware of what had happened to Caitlin. He told them that he'd been out with friends doing various activities. There was a note that Caitlin had written to him on a table in the house telling him that she would be home at a certain time. He told investigators that they had had an argument, but she was unaware that she may have been wanting to leave him. And later, he went to the hospital and joined her parents, her mother and father. 24 hours passed, and tragically, Caitlin passed away. 6 months after her murder, investigators announced that she had been the victim of a random act of violence. Her mom didn't believe this and started her own investigation. She believed that she had found evidence that Caitlin had known her killer. And she believed that Caitlin could have potentially been killed by a hired assassin because she knew too much about Dong's criminal activities, which included staging accidents and some of those proceeds they had used for their apartment. So 2 months before her murder, the couple had taken a trip to Southern California. And during this time, she had become involved in this, car insurance scam. Her sister, Caitlin's sister, learned that there was an accident that had been staged a few months earlier, and that Dong had used a car that Caitlin had rented with her mom's credit card. The accident was allegedly orchestrated by an organization that existed within Southern California's Vietnamese community. Everyone involved in it complained of soft tissue injuries that were later treated by a doctor who was also involved in this organization. A paralegal working out of an Orange County law office in Southern California handled the insurance claim, and for their part, Caitlin and Dong were given $1,500. They used the money for the apartment. Caitlin's mom believed that since she was breaking up with Dong, the other gang members might have feared she would go to the police and tried to silence her. A few weeks after the murder, Mom discovered that 3 phone calls had been made from Caitlin's apartment. They were virtually the same time she had died, but at the time, Dong was with them. The calls were made to a Vietnamese paralegal that worked in Orange County. This was the same one that was involved in the setup for the accidents. Now, a private investigator hired by Caitlin's mom spoke to the landlord of the apartment and he believed that Caitlin was afraid of the people who were apparently involved in the criminal activities, who were basically her boyfriend's friends. When they were around, they would make fun of her, and they only spoke Vietnamese. Often, what the landlord observed seemed to be that the center of the couple's arguments and them not getting along while living together centered around these friends. So the investigator compared the note allegedly left by Caitlin on the night of her murder to known samples of her handwriting, and he decided he didn't believe it was written by her. The landlord also claimed that 3 of Dong's friends were in the apartment on the night of July 17th, which would have been around the time that Caitlin died in the hospital. However, the Albuquerque police did not believe that Dong and the Vietnamese gang were involved in her murder. They believed that her murder was a random act of violence. 6 months after the murder, an informant led police to a man named Robert Garcia. He was interrogated for several hours before telling investigators that he had been in a car with 3 friends on the night of Caitlin's murder. He claimed that one of them shot a woman in her car on a dare. So based on Robert's testimony, police arrested Dennis Martinez, Juvenal Escobedo, and Miguel Garcia, who's not related to Robert Garcia. According to Robert, Miguel was the triggerman, and police discovered that Juvenal had recently sold his car, which is a brown Chevrolet Camaro. Who buys a Camaro in brown? They connected it to an eyewitness who claimed that they had seen someone chasing a young woman in her car on the night of Caitlin's murder. So this was an hour earlier.
I think it must have been gold, and they just called it brown.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I know exactly what color you're talking about. Actually, that was what I had a Jeep that color.
Yeah, because who would buy a brown Camaro?
So this case falls apart when it's discovered that Robert Garcia had been in jail on the night of Caitlin's murder. So in April of 1991, 2 years later, charges against all three suspects are dropped due to lack of evidence. As a result of pressure from Caitlin's family, investigators decided to re-interview Dung. This time, he did admit to being involved in an auto insurance scam. However, he nor his friends were ever charged related to the scam, and police did not consider him a suspect in Caitlin's murder. Her family is convinced that her murder was not a random act of violence and that they were certain she was silenced because of her knowledge of the insurance scam and other illegal activities. What's crazy is, okay, this is still unresolved, but on the Unsolved Mysteries page, I found this reference. Mom's private investigator, Pat Caristo, discovered that a man named Paul Apodaca was found standing next to Caitlin's car when police arrived at the scene, driving a primer gray Volkswagen Beetle. His information was taken down, but he was allowed to leave. The police didn't run his name. He was never interviewed about the case. Mom was shocked to learn that he had an extensive criminal history, including multiple convictions for attacking and robbing women. A few years after Caitlin's murder, he was convicted of raping his 14-year-old stepsister. This is the time he rapes his stepsister so he could go to prison with his brother. Caristo, the private investigator, discovered that Caitlin's car had been hit by at least one vehicle before it crashed into the light pole. Mom suspected that the police department was involved in a cover-up related to this case. In 2003, a cold case squad investigating the case determined that Caitlin had been shot after her car collided with the light pole. This is based on the accuracy of the shots, suggesting that they were fired at a close range and a non-moving target. And as we know, in July of 2021, Apodaca confessed to police that he had murdered Caitlin and two other women. This is one of those murders. The other victim's name has not been released yet. He confessed to several rapes that took place in the early 90s, and he's been arrested and charged with Althea's murder. He's not been charged yet in Caitlin's case, I want to say, but that is that is about to happen.
And so, what do you think about that?
Oh my God. Like all of the things that happened here, it's made so much worse with the last revelation, but like, geez.
That he was at the crime scene?
Yeah. Well, that they went after the boyfriend.
They went after like everybody. So it's another case, which I don't know what order this is airing in. It doesn't really matter. But so he was randomly there.
Yep.
And there's different accounts as to whether or not, like, exactly what happened. But at least one of the officers that was involved in coming out to the scene, they took note of who he was. And so there's a record of it, like an official record. And then it looks like along the way there were, like you said, the family's private investigator, like they suspected him.
Yep.
And now he's confessed.
Yes. And Mom never got to find out she died in 2016. Died. So we haven't said who this was, and I want to do that part. I read her books.
I did too.
I'm actually in the movie adaptation of one of her books. And someone who was from my college class wrote that adaptation and wrote another adaptation. But this was the daughter of Lois Duncan.
Yeah. And
who wrote I Know What You Did Last Summer, Hotel for Dogs, Summer of Fear, Killing Mr. Griffin. And I'm in I Know What You Did Last Summer, the first one.
And so and after her daughter was killed, and from what we can tell, if Paul Apodaca did this, it was random.
Yeah.
He now it seems like it. So would you consider his other victim, would you consider that to be random too, since he was a security guard there?
Yeah, I think they're all going to be pretty much random.
Is it stranger?
I don't know about... See, technically, I think most of these are going to end up being stranger or acquaintance. I don't... Like, it's definitely not like domestic partners or family members.
No, but paths crossing to me is different than
this would be like stranger. A workplace killing, I think. She never wrote another mystery thriller.
Well, I
She had one in the
know.
works, but
And
she
she
didn't.
probably was like, I brought this on myself. I can only imagine the torture she must have faced. Because, okay, so your daughter's driving home. She was, just out of high school.
Yeah.
And all this other stuff came to light. And if it ends up being that Paul Apodaca did it, like none of that stuff was relevant to her death. It was all just random. And everybody's life just got ripped apart because, now you said that there were other people in the car too?
No. That was Richard Garcia. Those people the charges were dropped.
Right. Okay. So, Paul Apodaca has confessed to it, and it actually lines up because not only has he confessed to it, but he was on the scene.
Yeah.
And he has a criminal history that sort of lines up, and then apparently he's got counsel and he's been shut down. But why do you think he confessed at this point? Do you think he feels guilty, or do you think he just wants to go to jail?
I think we're going to find out that he's sick.
He needs health care.
I think that he needs health care. That's what I think we're going to find out. I think
he's been storing up these murders.
Yeah, I started. So this is one of those that, like, I was like, oh, how far down this path do we go? I saw that Rolling Stone picked up the story yesterday, I think. So what's going to happen with this is there's going to be a huge onslaught, and everybody's going to cover it. So I wanted to cover it now because of my affinity for Lois Duncan, and those books that she wrote towards the end, like so let's just talk about that for a second. Lois Duncan was born in 1934. For those of you who don't know, she was an American writer, a novelist, a poet, a journalist. She was best known for a series of young adult novels that were anthology in nature. They weren't related, but so she was born in 1934, her daughter dying in 1989. She was 65 years old when that happened. So her career had been one thing up until that happened. She did release one more supernatural thriller in 1997. It's called Gallows Hill. In my opinion, it was not great. It was good, but it was written 8 years after the previous novel, which was Don't Look Behind You. And then she wrote Who Killed My Daughter, which is about her daughter, and a sequel to that called One to the Wolves came out in 2013, which is 3 years before Lois died, and the foreword in that one was written by Anne Rule. But before all this happened, I named a couple of them, but she had written, I think it's like 21 or 22 young adult thrillers. Multiple movies have been made from these, and television shows and all sorts of stuff has gone on with her. But this is it's a huge deal that this case is closed, even though she has passed away. She passed away on June 15th of 2016, so almost exactly 5 years ago, at her home in Bradenton, Florida. They did not disclose the causes, but it was she had a series of strokes, according to her husband, in the years prior to her death. This one is, it's a big deal for me because I always remember thinking, what in the world happened to her kid? Because it was one of those things where I very much believe in the universe giving back to you what you give out to the universe. So for her kid to have been a part of all that, and she has ties to the area that I sort of did my college stuff in. In the 50s, she went to Duke University, but she ended up dropping out.
It's really interesting because I remember this. There's a picture of, I don't know what it would have been on, but maybe the back of a book, or it's the picture where Lois Duncan's daughter she's got her hand under her chin. Like
a graduation picture?
No, I don't think it's a graduation picture. Hold on, I'll show it to you. But it was on something, and I just remember seeing it. And I remember this over any other part of the story, that picture. And it was just so sad what happened. Don't Look Behind You is one of my favorite books as a child.
Yeah, that was so in my mind. That's the last one. Like I don't like. So she wrote the other one. Gallows Hill is the name of the other one. But the story I heard was the way that she said it. Don't Look Behind You was basically being published as her daughter died. It was published in summer of 1989. And there's a television movie with Pam Dauber and Patrick Duffy, and it was I remember watching it a long time ago. But that is the earmark. Like, in my mind, that's what I think about is like Lois Duncan. Don't Look Behind You.
Yeah, that's tough. There's a line in that book about. Now, I was really young at this point in time. I was probably too young to be reading these books, but I was. And so one of the things about that book that struck me the most, like it just really stuck out in my mind, was that the girl had to cut her hair with a pair of fingernails cutting scissors.
Yeah.
And I always thought, like, why on earth would you cut your hair with a pair of fingernail scissors? You know, because they had to leave and go on the run all of a sudden, and they dyed her hair and she had to cut it. I was like, it seems like that would draw a lot of attention to your hair if you cut it with fingernail scissors.
Well, that book, it's funny that you say it that way because there was
I was in the single digits when I read this book. Okay, I'm just saying.
You were like 9 or something.
That's how young I was. Yes, I was in the single. I was very, very young. So that's what in all of the stuff that happened there. That's what stood out to me was like, how did she cut her hair with fingernail scissors? That's crazy.
Well, I don't like it. This one always was interesting to me, and I'm not saying anything negative when I say this, but I'm just going to say it. The year before this book came out, so I'm sure she was already writing it, but in February of 1988, there's a movie that came out on TV called Moving Target, and it starred Jason Bateman playing a kid named Toby Kellogg, and he's a musician that's like, I can't remember if he's off at school. This is one of my favorite movies. I saw it 50,000 times. He goes home and his family is gone. They have vanished. So these killers come for them. And it's very similar story to Don't Look Behind You. But it's told from the perspective of, Jason Bateman's character. So when this book came out, I was so excited because it was like there was a, sort of a sister pairing to it. But anyways, that was.
That's funny. I like Jason Bateman in, most stuff that I've never seen anything I didn't like, but and I don't remember that movie, I don't think, but if I saw it, I might. But like I said, and, when we're talking about 88, 89, I was single digit aged. So that's crazy to think about.
Yeah, that is.
But no, Lois Duncan had a huge impact on my childhood. And subliminally, because when you sent me the thing about the guy, Paul Apodaca confessing, I initially was like, that seems vaguely familiar to me. Did you see the picture I sent you?
Yeah, I remember that picture.
Okay, yeah. And so when I saw that picture, I was like, oh, wow, I know a lot about this.
Yep.
But it didn't initially click. I mean, obviously Lois Duncan did, but I think I was so young. Like I said, single digits. I think I subconsciously blocked some of it out because that would be a really scary thing to like grow up with.
Yeah.
Like thinking about her, like an author writing these chilling thriller books and then having it happen. Yeah,
so it was really strange. I I don't usually get Rolling Stone stuff. I've been getting them recently because I went and did because the pandemic was wrapping up. We went. We thought it was, at least. I know it's not really wrapping up. I'm saying the way the world responds to it was, we had gone to several concerts. My wife and my family love live music, so we were going out to do several things. So one of the things that's a side effect of like having tickets from Ticketmaster or whatnot is you end up with free subscriptions to Rolling Stones for X amount of time. And that article popped up, and I was like, oh my God. I cannot describe to you like the feeling I have. It was like really weird. I was suddenly back in like in the early 90s.
Yeah, 1990. Yeah. It's that, yeah, it really is something to me too. And I'm actually a little embarrassed at like, for, having forgotten that case. And it, obviously it took over Lois Duncan's life like it would any parent, but it is a big deal. And I hope, some light is brought to this. I think from what we've seen so far, it's, I really wish that we could find out that like it wasn't random and he's not a complete stranger, but I'm afraid that might be what it is. And see, that's what horror stories are made of. And he had no idea, of course, that he was killing Lois Duncan's daughter, I would imagine.
My guess, he saw her, followed her, got in his vehicle, didn't realize she was getting in the vehicle, realized, he's still following. Now he's following her vehicle with his, and was doing the same thing that he was doing to the other girl. That's my guess.
Right. And so and now I'm a little bit confused. I can't remember. I remember being enthralled with the case because it, like you were reading, it went back and forth. There was actually charges brought and then dropped, but and so it went a completely different route based on just circumstances, and it illustrates really well like how things can get out of hand really fast because even though they were doing stuff, like there was involvement from other people with like the scams and the supposed drug activity or whatever.
There was so much going on in this
case. But none of it had anything to do with the murder. And
that's what I was about to say. It's so weird.
All that stuff comes out because I'm telling you, if you dig enough, you will find something, right? It doesn't mean it has anything to do with the crime. It just means you will find something. And so I remember, just sort of, I lost my train of thought. Dang it. What was I saying?
You were talking about digging and finding something. You remember reading about the case. You were enthralled with the suspense and intrigue part of it?
I remember. Oh, this is the part okay, yeah, sorry. So I was really enthralled with this case, but, so was she shot first or was she hit first?
Probably hit and then shot based on the most recent reports.
Right. And so in my mind, the way I recall it from being a small, a child, I thought she was driving along and had just been shot twice. Like there was no other interaction. So I imagined this teenage girl driving her vehicle. And so that became a possibility to me that you could just be driving out and get shot twice randomly.
Huh.
And so that's a hard pill to swallow.
This guy was apparently related to it somehow. I don't know. I think he hit her and then shot her.
Right. And so
I don't think it was random that he came across her and then killed her. Does that make sense?
There's no way.
I don't think he pulled up on an accident scene. I think he made her crash.
There's no way that happened.
Yeah, so this guy,
but I'm saying,
this isn't a random shot while driving thing.
Well, okay, but so let me sort of, okay. You're driving along, 2 shots, you crash your car and you're dead. Okay, that's what I had in my head. This is a situation where somebody hits you, then they like shoot you twice, and she was in a coma for like a while, like a day or something before she died. And so it's actually a different thing. I would actually prefer to be hit and then like have to go through the process of realizing what's happening to you, as opposed to just, do you know how scary it is to think you could just be shot twice while you're driving?
Oh yeah, that's why I wasn't contradicting you. I was saying to you as a form of relief, it's way like that statistic in your mind
it's
should
too bad
drop
I didn't
infinitely.
know that when I was a child, because I've thought about that my whole life.
Well.
So that's what I mean when I say I've blocked it out, because I imagine I just had to block it out. But I had in my head, I pictured Lois Duncan's daughter. I didn't know her name when I was a kid, getting shot while she was driving along. And actually, it was sunny outside when it happened, but it clearly happened at night. And so I was unaware of that. But I'm just saying I was a child, so I didn't pay as much attention to the details.
Well, that is all for today. And we'll be back next week. Do you have anything else you want to add on this?
No, I really hope that I hope this all pans out. It sucks that she died before. I guess she knows now, though, right?
Yeah. I mean, if we go back to the universe, she knew in 2016, you know? Thanks for joining us as we move from summer into fall, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to check out our sponsorship partner, LabRottiCreations.com. You can use the code CRIMEXS there to get a fun pop pet portrait of your very own pet. Thanks for joining us.